on, we knew that our black friends lived in a certain part of town, but they participated in everything at the high school that I participated in. So I went away to seminary, to college, at Houghton College down here in Allegheny County, so that really didn't expose me to much of America's social conflict. And finally I went to Chicago, to the suburbs of Chicago, to seminary, to a school sponsored at the time by the Evangelical United Brethren Church, which I was a member of. And I started going as a youth minister to Chicago, to an inner city church in Chicago. It was primarily a white church in terms of it wasn't very well integrated, but the ministers there and the people at the church were very involved, became very involved in what we called integration. The fact that our church and the community itself needed to be open, and it needed to have people. We didn't, segregation after Brown versus Board became a bad word, I think. It was also a time, not only was I getting personally educated, but it was a time of great positive feeling. It was a time of idealism. I mean, students like myself were in an urban community like this, became very involved in these issues and went to meetings and rallies and things like that. Our church on the near north side of Chicago decided, because one of our ministers had gone to seminary with a gentleman who was now the chaplain of Tougaloo College outside of Jackson, Mississippi. And this was a white guy by the name of Ed King, but he was the chaplain at Tougaloo College, which was an all-black school. And the issue became, I was working in a Methodist church, and eventually the United Brethren became Methodist. I don't know if any of you folks go back to that time, but anyway, at the time we were not Methodist, but I was working in a Methodist church. And in the Methodist church, there was a segregated system called the central jurisdiction of the Methodist Church. And it came out of Jim Crow in the South, and basically the black Methodist churches in the South were all black. They were part of the Methodist Church. In the Methodist churches in the South, who called Methodist churches, were all white. And never the twain shall meet. And around Chicago and places like that, we'd have interracial congregations and stuff, but it became apparent that this was a big issue, especially in the South in the Methodist Church. So we started doing interracial church visitations. And Ed King, who was the minister and the chaplain at Tougaloo College, would call his buddies up in Chicago and say, well, send me 3 more people next Friday. So next Sunday we're going to visit the such and such church. All white churches, of course. And we'd pick up a black student or 2 at Tougaloo College, and we'd go as an integrated group to church. And people had gotten arrested, guy got thrown in jail. The night I went, we drove down from Chicago, maybe it was early on Friday, we got there late Friday night, and met the guy, his name was Tom Strong. I remember this young student that I was going to go with, and another guy, to church at the leading Methodist church, the Jackson Street Methodist Church, wherever it was called in Jackson, Mississippi. I can't even remember it now, but I remember the night before going, though, and we got briefed by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I met a guy by the name of Mickey Schwerner, and Schwerner had also gave me a sales pitch about coming back for the registration program in the summer of '64, which I told him I might do it. Later on, it worked out. I had to stay in Chicago at this church and I was a youth minister. I wasn't ordained, but I was a student and I was working at this church. But I remember the night before when they told us how to roll if we got hit, and how to cover our genitals, and how to put our arms over our back and things like that. And then the final advice was, you're going to have 1 phone call you're going to be able to make. That's it. So don't take anything more than a quarter in your pocket, because you'll never see the rest of it if you take any more money. And here's the phone number. Write it now on the palm of your hand. So we all wrote the phone number on the palm of our hand. And the next morning we went in a car to church. And it was amazing. Tom, this young black student, he was just shaking like a leaf. I mean, I was from Chicago, Jamestown. They can't be that bad down there. But we went to the church, but we'd been told not to push it too far because there was already a couple of people from the prior week in jail, and they didn't have any bail money. They didn't want more to go into this jail. So we went up to the front of the church, and one of the sextons or the members of the chief board of trustees or something came down the steps and met us. He was very cordial. I'm sorry you can't come in. I'm sorry you can't come in. We argued with him for a while until a couple of cop cars with corn poppers started coming up by the front steps of the church. When we said, all right, thank you. He said, I will meet with you Monday morning in my office if you stay. So we ended up staying through Monday and went to meet with this fella. And then there was just a couple of other experiences I remember. We went to a black church that night. We left the Methodist church and guess where we went to church? We went to a Catholic church because the Pope had said, we don't believe in segregation. I don't care where you live, in Mississippi or wherever you are. We don't do it that way. And so we went, it was an integrated service. I mean, in Jackson, Mississippi, but it was Roman Catholic. And so we went there for church, went back to the college and came back to a black church at night. And they were all welcoming us and thanking us, and we had a nice dinner there, as I remember. And then they sang an old spiritual that I'd never heard before, but I still remember the words. Soon we'll be done with the troubles of the world. We're going to go home and live with God. That's it. Oh my gosh, I'd never heard that in Chicago or Jamestown or any place. But I heard them singing this song and I said, wow, this is big. But it was a heady time. It was an idealistic time. Later in the summer, Martin Luther King came to Chicago, went to the Soldiers Field to see him speak. And then I'll just say that by the end of my seminary years, and I decided not to get ordained for a lot of different reasons, I went back and graduated from the seminary. But by 1966, things had soured more. I mean, there had been riots in the cities. White people were not as welcome, I don't think, as to be a part of the civil rights movement. It had sort of gone over a certain ledge and was going in a little different direction. And Martin Luther King had problems with his own people. I mean, it got a little bit testy. I mean, some people didn't think the movement was moving fast enough. And King was trying to make sure that it didn't go too fast so that the country would come along with it. But it was 64 was a wonderful time to be alive, and it changed my life a lot because I was introduced to issues in the world that here in Chautauqua County I'd never realized existed, and had a small little piece to play that one weekend, and in the church that I worked in was quite involved in the civil rights movement. And then I was lucky, I guess, that the church wanted me to come and work for them that summer, so I didn't go back to Mississippi. If I would have gone down to Schwerner was one of the 3 guys that was killed in Philadelphia and was buried in that pond, that impoundment of that pond in Mississippi. So I never saw him again. But thank you.
Very good. Thank you, brother. The troubles of the world, troubles of the world, troubles of the world. Sooner we'll be done with the troubles of the world, going home to live with God.